I just wanted to jump on here as I'm just thinking through some thoughts or some ideas. And, I went live this morning and the question I had was, why are we last? Right? Why do we keep coming up last? And I think historically we know the answer to that, right? We know a lot of the things that were done, right? We've only had the opportunity to participate in the full economy and full capitalism for the last 50 years, right? Before that, we were essentially, living in an economy with one hand tied behind our back in terms of Jim Crow laws, in terms of the Reconstruction era, and obviously slavery. So we know how we got here historically. But even today, why are we still last? When it comes to education, when it comes to income, when it comes to the racial wealth gap, what is the reason why we continue to come up last? And the fact is, we have $1.5 trillion worth of spending power, right? So we are not void of resources. We have resources. So why are we last? And it all starts with the mindset. That's why I call this podcast the wealth mindset, because it's not as simple as us being given more resources, right? It's us having a similar collective thought to be able to use the resources that we have. In the past 30 or 40 years, we have probably created more millionaires in our community than ever before. But at the same time, in terms of the racial wealth gap, we are dead last. Our median net worth is around $17,000. Our median income is around $25,000 to $30,000. These are 17 times less than white families. And so I spent a lot of time thinking to myself, how do we change that? How do we change that? Right? I'm not just about talking about the problem. We continue to go back on history, right, and regurgitate the reasons. We accept the reasons. What are the solutions? How do we climb out of the hole? How do we close the racial wealth gap? That's what I think about all the time. How do we go about closing the racial wealth gap? And honestly, the answer to that is not anything that anyone else is going to do for us. It's not anything that somebody else is going to put towards our communities. It's going to start from within. I always say change begins from within. And so, how do we fix this dichotomy that we have a $1.5 trillion worth of spending power, yet we have a median net worth of less than $17,000? How do we change that, right? How do we go from, almost dead last in our earnings to first? How do we ascend? What is the answer? I'm going to tell you the answer, right? The first thing we have to really do is accept and understand what wealth is, because we have this skewed definition. We always conflate the difference between being rich and being wealthy, right? Wealth is the separation of time and money. You cannot become wealthy until you separate your time and your money. When your assets, when your value, when your resources, when your income increase without you having to work for it, right? How do we speed up the process? Because we can't work our way out of poverty. We can't work our way out of our circumstances. We can't catch up with the racial wealth gap with just our time and our labor and our efforts. It's impossible to do, right? There are three components to any economy. There's the people, which are the workers, right? The labor that makes up 60 to 70% of the economy. But also you have the ideas and the innovations, which are the business owners. And then you have the capital. What does rich mean to me? To me, rich is just the abundance of resources and money. You have a lot of money, you have a lot of resources, and you're rich, right? You can go viral and get rich. You can hit the lottery and get rich. You can have a successful business and get rich. But as long as either the money or income requires your time, then you can't get wealthy, because the minute you start working, the income stops, right? Or if you get a whole bunch of money and you don't know how to handle that wealth, you're not going to be able to keep it, right? So a certain amount of wisdom is required when it comes to getting wealth, right? If somebody wins the lottery, that's why most lottery winners lose all their money, because, right, they get this huge amount of wealth, but their wisdom does not connect with the wealth that they have. They don't know what to do, right? They don't know what to do in the banking system. They don't know where to place this money, right? They don't know who to trust. And so what happens is they have all of these riches, but because it's not connected to their wisdom, they lose it, right? But you take a self-made multimillionaire or billionaire and they lose everything, but then they still have the wisdom. They still have the work that it took to get there, the failures, the things that it took for them to survive, right? They still have that knowledge, so it's going to be easier for them to bounce back and regain everything that they lost. And right now, as a community, we all looking for the bag. We all trying to chase the bag. We're trying to go after this idea of getting to the money fast. But that's not going to change our economic circumstances. That's not going to change our situation, right? We have to take a long-term approach to wealth. We have to think about it in a different way. The reason why other communities can thrive in how they do things is because they have a collective mindset. It's not just about, you know, me personally ascending. It's how do we collectively ascend, right? And so until we have that mindset, we're going to continue to create individual single millionaires, but that's not enough for us to take us out of our situation, right? You know, and people are always talking about where to start, where to start. The 100% fact of the matter is that 85% of the children in our community cannot read or do basic math. And so we don't need to start with fixing people's credit or giving people investment advice, right? We need to start with how we are educating and preparing our children, because it doesn't matter what we are fighting for or what we are searching for in terms of answers or what policies we trying to pass. None of that is going to matter if we are not preparing our children for the next generation. It's going to be completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter what policies we pass, what funding we get. If 85% of our children cannot read or do math at an acceptable level. And so if we're not starting at the source, then everything else is going to be pointless, right? If we just continue to go down this same path and we are not prioritizing, in 10 years, the children that are in elementary school are going to be the next decision makers. And so if we are putting them into a whole world that is changing as we speak, that technology is completely taking over, and we're not even preparing them with the basics, then we're fighting a losing battle. And so when I look at our leaders, if they're not understanding this basic root problem and they're talking about problems that are stems, that are branches, that are leaves, that are not going to affect the collective growth of the tree, then to me, I can't give them my faith, my full faith and credit. We have to be talking about about the source of the problem. You know, the name of my company is called Attacking the Root. And the reason why I call my company Attacking the Root is because when it comes to life, it doesn't matter what it is. When you're trying to change something, when you're trying to grow something, when you're trying to develop something, when you're trying to grow a tree, you cannot manipulate it at the branches. You can't manipulate it at the stems. You can't manipulate it at the trees. When you're trying to change something, you have to attack it at the roots, at the source. And that's how I approach life. When I look at a problem, I'm not trying to make changes that are superficial, that don't have any true dynamic in terms of how things are changed. I am looking to change it at the source. And when it comes to all of the stuff that's going on in our community, we got to change it at the source. First, with the individual and how we think. Secondly, collectively in our own family unit and how we treat and interact with one another. And then thirdly, within our community and how we treat and interact one another. All of those things need to start from the bottom and grow out. Because if we don't have that collective mindset, then we all just fighting for what's left instead of pooling our thoughts, our minds, our energy, our ideas together to be able to grow together. It's just that simple. I mean, other communities do it, right? We're in a world of resources and we are essentially in competition for resources, right? We do it in a civilized way through capitalism, through competition, through business ownership, through education, right? There's an opportunity for us to do that, but we have to have a plan to be able to compete. And my point is that we cannot do that if we are not foundationally educating our children. I have 4 boys. I taught all of my sons myself how to read, right? Not because the schools aren't good or decent where we live, but it is not the school's responsibility to prepare my children for the world. I taught all of my children multiplication and division in the first grade, right? And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because I think it is that important for children to have the basic fundamentals. Because what I tell my kids is if you can do math, you can solve problems in life. Math teaches you how to think. If you can do math, you can solve problems. And if you can read, nobody can withhold information from you. Nobody can keep anything from you. And so every day I make my children read, I make them do math problems until their recall on these things is so precise that they're prepared for anything that the school system gives them. But these are just fundamental things that I think we can all do in our homes just with routine and discipline and just simply preparing our children for this world. Because when I tell you it is changing faster than we know, it is changing faster than we can prepare for. And if we don't have a fundamental understanding of basic things, we are not going to keep up. We're going to be stuck at what I call the unskilled labor phase. Right? When it comes to the people part of an economy, the people are the workers. We make up the economy. Right? The doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, the construction workers, the police officers, the teachers, right? We make up the economy, both with our work, our labor, and our consumption, the things that we buy. But in the people part, there is 2 types of labor. There is skilled labor and there is unskilled labor. And as long as you remain in the unskilled labor category, there will always be a ceiling on what you can earn. And if we are graduating children that cannot read or write or do basic math, then we are giving them a ceiling on what they can earn in life because they will always be relegated to the unskilled labor part of the economy. It's only so much you can do if you have no basic skills. And so if we are sending 16, 17, 18-year-olds out into the world with not even the basic skills on how to read, write, and do math, what do we think the result is going to be? We're failing our children. So if that is not the priority, then I don't know where else we can start. That should be the priority. That's how we get out of the people part of the economy. First, we have to create skilled labor. I don't care what it is. It can be skills with your hands. It can be STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, right? It can be a trade. We need to be able to teach our children to do something that no one can take from them, a skill that is transferable in the marketplace. Give them something of value, right? The first thing that we have of value is ourselves. And so all of our goals should be to develop ourselves into something that has value in the marketplace. Whatever it is that you do, right? You can earn a living doing that. And the more valuable that skill is, the more you can demand for your time. So first off, we need to be creating skilled laborers in the marketplace. Once we have that, overall, we collectively increase our earning potential as a community, right? But then once we're skilled at something, then we can earn enough capital to get into the other parts of the economy. The ideas and the innovations, which are business owners. It's hard to be a business owner if you have no skills whatsoever, because what service or product are you going to sell? But the more skilled laborers we create, the more people that can also get into the ideas and innovations, the entrepreneurship, business ownership. That's really how we create wealth. Because outside of yourself, the second way to create wealth is to create assets. Start a business. You can essentially have an idea that has no value and you implement it into reality, and it can be worth billions of dollars. You just have to be able to execute. But it starts with an idea and an innovation and a risk, right? The more skills you have, the more you develop yourself, the more ideas you can put into the marketplace to implement. We need business ownership. We need our talents, abilities, and gifts to create assets in the marketplace. We can create value. We don't need anybody to give us value. We can create value in the marketplace. Right now, we have over 3 million businesses in our community, but 95% of those businesses are single owner businesses, meaning there's just somebody started a business and they're the only person that does everything, right? That's great from an entrepreneurship perspective, but the problem is that the value of all of the businesses in our community, 95% of that value is tied into the life of one person. So if something happens to that person, the value of the business is gone. And so how do we then, as we grow and push our community into entrepreneurship, then create enough value in those businesses where they can grow and expand, right? And that the value is not tied up in just the life of one person, right? How do we grow beyond a sole proprietorship mindset and status and actually grow businesses, right, that employ people, that employ our own community, right? And so that's really the next phase, to create assets, to create wealth within our community. I have no doubt that we can do that because we have so many talents, abilities, and gifts that are already there. We just need to be able to formalize and organize. And when I tell people in terms of business ownership, it's not enough to have a great business idea. And I say this all the time. A hustle is an informal, unorganized business, but a business is a formalized, organized hustle, right? And so if you have something that you know how to make money at, you have something that you enjoy doing, you have something that you're good at, you need to formalize and organize it to make it a legitimate business. It's not enough just to have a hustle, right? Just because you're making money at it, if it's not formalized and organized, it's not a legitimate business, right? It's people that have hustles for years. They make millions of dollars with hustles, but a hustle has no value outside of yourself, right? If something happens to you, the hustle is over with. And so the first thing you need to do is formalize it and organize it. Formalize it in the eyes of the legal community and of the financial system. Because you want to be a legitimate business, that's how you get benefits. That's how you get tax benefits, right? That's how you become a part of the capitalistic system and take advantage of everything that's available to you. And you want to formalize in the eyes of the financial system. That's how you create leverage. That's how you get access to capital. But you can't do that if you just have a hustle. You have to formalize. But the second thing you need to do is organize, right? Create a consistent and repeatable process in your business. You have to be organized in a way where your business is repeatable, right? Where people have an expectation of what you're going to deliver each time. It's a reason why when you go to Chick-fil-A, I don't care if it's in Texas or if it's in California, it's going to taste the same, it's going to feel the same, and ultimately it is going to be the same experience. It's because they have formalized and organized. They have a formalized and organized process. If you're in business for yourself, my advice is you need to have a formalized, organized process in how you do business with every client or every customer. That gives your business value, right? Because now people know what to expect. Once you've formalized and organized, essentially what you've done is turn that hustle into a business. Now that you have a business, the next step is to take that business and turn it into a company. There's a big difference between a business and a company. Anybody can start a business, right? You formalize and organize, you have a business. But a lot of times we have businesses and we doing everything. Even if the business is making money, you are doing everything. You're doing all the filing, the marketing, the accounting, right? The phone calls with the customer service, with everything. So you have a business, but you don't have a company. The business is you. You are the value. So if something happens to you, the business stops. If you can't leave your business for a few days and it doesn't all blow up, then you don't have a company, right? And so your goal is, how do I turn this business? How do I turn this asset that I'm running, that I'm doing everything? How do I take it and turn it into a company, right? And the process is really automate, delegate, and separate yourself from the business, right? When I talk to business owners, and a part of my practice, we help business owners sell companies, right? And so I meet, business owners all the time that, have companies worth 5, 10, 20, $50 million, right? These are conversations I have every week. And ultimately, the value of the business is determined by its independence from the owner. I'm going to say that again. The value of the business is determined by its independence of the owner. If the owner has to be there every day for the business to operate and run, that business is going to be worth much, much less than the business owner that can take a week vacation and the business still operate at the same level. And so ultimately the goal before we get to a point where the business owner is ready to sell is that we maximize, right, every facet of the capital in the business so that it can essentially become an asset without them being there. And if you can create an asset without you having to be there, now you have something that you can either sell on the open market or pass down to your children in the next generation. That's how you create generational wealth. You turn that business into a company. And then once you have a company, once you have an asset that is separate from you, now you have something that can create unlimited value. Now you can be strategic, right? Once a business owner gets to that level, now you can think, how do I grow this business, right? How do I integrate, right? How do I move up the supply chain? How do I add more value? How do I implement all these other ideas? A lot of times you don't have time to do that as a business owner when you're doing everything, right? You're doing the marketing, you're doing the phone calls, right? You're doing it. You don't have time to be strategic. But once you create a company, once you automate, right, all of these artificial intelligence, technological resources available, I don't care what business you're in, you should be able to automate at least 50% of your tasks, right? The next thing, delegate. Find ways to delegate responsibility. If you have employees, delegate to them. If you don't have employees, delegate to technology. Find ways to take things off of your plate. And the last thing to do is separate. The hardest thing for me to do in my practice was to separate and to trust other people to do things. because I always felt like I had to do everything. They're not going to do it right. And I would spend all of my time doing those little things. And but the best thing I did was separate myself from the business and delegate things to somebody else and trust that they would get it done. Sometimes that takes time. Sometimes you have to create a system or a process. But the goal ultimately is to create an asset that is separate and apart from yourself. And now you can be strategic and create unlimited value. I call that the HBCU process for business owners, from hustle to business to company to unlimited value. But once we get to that part of the economics, that's when we're going to be financially independent. Once we don't just have a bunch of hustles, but we have legitimate, formalized, organized businesses, right? And we take those businesses through the value chain, and then we have the opportunity to integrate our families or to sell them on the open market. A lot of my business owners clients are serial entrepreneurs. They take a company, they build it up for 5 or 10 years, right? And they sell it as an asset for millions and millions of dollars. There's no reason we can't repeat that process in our own communities. I see it all the time. It's not that difficult. That's how we participate in the second part of the economy. Get out of the people part of the economy where we're the laborers, we're the workers, we do all the hard work, and get into the ownership part, the ideas, the innovations, right? And then the last part of the economy is the capital, the investment of capital, the access to capital, and the use of capital. That's the last part. And the last way to create wealth is to buy assets, to buy things of value. That should be all of our goals, to buy things of value. So it doesn't matter if you are a worker or if you're an entrepreneur, right? You're going to have some type of income. There's what you bring in, and then there's what you spend. The gap between those is your net profit. A portion of that profit, a portion of what you make every month should be going to buying assets, to buying things of value. Automated. When I first started out in my 20s, I don't care if it was $50 a month. Whatever I could afford, I was automatically putting it away. Systematically building wealth, buying assets, buy things of value, stocks, bonds, real estate, businesses, land, artwork, whatever it is, right? That's up to you, your financial plan, and whoever you're working with. But the point is, you should be buying things of value, period. Most people don't have lump sums of money to just go buy, investments for 100 or 250,000 or $1 million, right? And so you have to work it into your everyday life. And the easiest way to do that is to automatically every month buy things of value. I don't care if that's you investing in your retirement accounts. I don't care if that's you doing stuff on the side, right? Whatever it is that you choose to do, the goal should be to be buying things of value. And so if you're creating wealth in those three ways, by buying assets, by creating assets, and by becoming an asset, you're essentially participating in every phase of economics, in every phase of what makes an economy work. Because you have value yourself, you have a talent, ability, a gift, or skill, right? In the marketplace. If you're a business owner, now you have something of value that is separate and apart from yourself. And then lastly, you're taking whatever profit you're earning and you're reinvesting that by buying more things of value. And I promise if you follow that process for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you will have millions of dollars at your disposal. Period. That's the way the math works. What's the point of us doing all of this? To take advantage of the math, to put the numbers in your favor, to take advantage of compound interest. The reason why we can't get rich working is because our time has to be included in that. We got to give out, it's only 24 hours in a day. The reason why investing is so compelling is because it takes advantage of the numbers. Compound interest compounds whether you are working or not. And eventually that compound interest extrapolates so much that it replaces your income. That's the point. That's when you become wealthy. When your income, when your resources, when your assets increase without the requirement of your time. And if we can adopt that mindset when it comes to wealth, we can close the racial wealth gap in one generation. So I just wanted to get that off my chest and say that if you like, my content, if you like my message, you can follow me on my website, www.jdgarnier.com. You can also follow me on social media at either JD Garnier or Garnier JD. And please support me. You can buy my brand new book, The Art of Diversity Selling: How to Transcend Societal Differences in Business. I just released my book last week. You can buy it on my website or you can buy it on Amazon. That's www.jdgarnier.com. Otherwise, have a good night.